Whether you're a liberal or a conservative, I think we just want competency in politics, and we're just not getting that right now. It's domination and one party rule. It feels like, but it might not be the worst thing. It would be a lot worse if the NDP won tonight. I think we can all agree on that.
What do we do for an encore? Well, I'm delighted to say we have independent journalist Harrison Faulkner on standby. And is Harrison there? Yes, there he is. Hey, Harrison, thank you so much for joining me. I got to tell you, the big question going into this snap election, at least for me, you're younger, you probably don't remember, but way back in 1990, the David Peterson Liberals had a majority government. And, the polls looked nice. There was also a scandal they wanted to get off the front page. And they decided that we're going to go to an early election. And Harrison, I can tell you the dynamic in 1990, nobody, and I mean the top polling agencies, the NDP itself, nobody dreamed that everybody was going to wake up in the province that year to an NDP government under Bob Rae. So that was the big question. Is this deja vu all over again? Obviously not. What do you think was the secret sauce for the Doug Ford PCs in going to the polls early, Harrison?
Well, I think the biggest thing was never letting a crisis go to waste. And we've seen that twice now with the PCs and with Doug Ford. They did that in 2022. I'm not exactly sure if it was an early election or if they had to call it. I think they had to call it, but they won because of a crisis that was happening in the country. And this tariff threat really is, for many people, a crisis. Sometimes other people will blow it up. Other people try to minimize it. But the reality is, if tariffs did come when they were originally expected to come, it would have been a disaster. And so I think Doug Ford just played his cards right and took advantage of this crisis. The other thing, too, however, is that I believe in 1990. I wasn't born for that. I wasn't around for that. But my guess is that Bob Rae's opposition was stronger than the opposition that exists right now in Ontario, because the Ontario Liberals and the Ontario NDP are just so pathetically weak that it's not even doing any service to Ontarians to have such a weak opposition. Whether you're a conservative or a liberal, I think people just want to have competency in office, whether that's in government or in opposition. And, the Liberals and the NDP, they didn't even run a full slate of candidates in this election. They barely had enough money to get this thing going. And Bonnie Crombie lost her seat tonight. So they were pathetically weak. David, you look at the situation in Ontario, and the obvious campaign line for the Liberals or the NDP would have been, is your life better after 8 years of Doug Ford than it is? Is it better? And the answer is obviously, I think for most people, no. The situation in Ontario is serious. Millions of Ontarians don't have a doctor. People can barely afford rent. They can barely afford to buy a home. The drug and addiction crisis is getting out of control. Our cities look like a sci-fi movie with the amount of carnage and death on our streets. I mean, this is really getting out of control. The province is not as good as it was before. And yet that wasn't really the line we got from the opposition. David, the opposition said they didn't even want the election in the first place.
No, 100%, Harrison. And I mean, and their coffers were depleted as well. Right. Let's not forget. And I'm going to further date myself in regard to how our cities look. I remember back in 1987, I've grown up in Toronto for all of my life except for 4 years. And I can tell you back in 1987, Peter Ustinov said, Toronto is New York as run by the Swiss. Now we are headed towards San Francisco North. That, New York run by the Swiss, that sailed years ago. The city is dirty. There is homelessness everywhere. We're having the worst crime wave ever. And that's the thing, Harrison, what I find incredible about this election, you mentioned early on, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, we have a housing crisis. We have a healthcare crisis. We have a cost of living crisis. We have a crime crisis. But the only crisis that seems to resonate or seemed to resonate, past tense, given that the Ford PCs have won again, is the fact that the Doug Ford PCs rolled the dice. We're going to go up against a candidate not on the ballot, namely Donald Trump, and the impending tariffs. And you need a champion to fight for you, because basically, if you think the cost of living is bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet if those 25% tariffs come in. And I got to say, Harrison, I call him like I see him. It looks like that strategy worked.
It absolutely did work. And you will see almost certainly once Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership race, they're going to try this as well. They're going to go straight to an election, I think, because this is what is driving Canadian politics. The threat of tariffs basically threw everything else in this country out the window. We seem to forget about all of the issues that are driving our country into the depths. And it's really too bad. But I will say there's two things on this. I think the reaction across the country to this tariff threat has actually been positive. We're now finally getting some traction and some serious talk about border policy and border security. We're also now getting some serious talk about interprovincial trade barriers. Not these things don't really become serious issues until in this country until it's really prompted. So I think that's positive. I have to say, I was listening to your previous segment, and I think that it's important to give a woman named Bobby Ann Brady her flowers. She won again. She won as an independent, opposing the PC party from the right. What the New Blue Party, what the Ontario Party was trying to do, Bobby Ann Brady on her own as an independent has been able to do it and get a seat, which is more than what the New Blue and Ontario Party can say for themselves tonight. And I think that that's a big lesson that a lot of these upstart parties, and you can call them fringe parties, but parties that are trying to break the establishment in this country, and I'm thinking mostly about the PPC at a federal level. You win by dominating the ground game, picking a riding, and doing everything you can, putting in the real graft, the hard work to get out the vote. It's a lot more important to have someone in the game when it's all said and done than to put up a good fight and have nothing to say for it.
Harrison, go ahead.
I think that is the lesson that these parties need to learn. They need to realize that whatever Bobby Ann Brady was doing on her own with her small team in Haldeman, Norfolk, is the answer for how you get in the game.
I couldn't agree more, Harrison. I've met a lot of great people at the Ontario Party, a lot of great people at the New Blue Party. I have all kinds of respect for Jim Karahalios and Derek Sloan. I would just love to lock them in a room and say, you ain't coming out until you put your heads together and run under one banner. Because right now, your focus is split. I think there might be some sort of bad blood between the two camps, which I don't understand. But you are right. Better to have one solitary member at Queen's Park, or in the case of the Greens, two, than just, I guess, unfocused opposition. Tell me, Harrison, as you watch the campaigns unfold, did anything stand out? You mentioned that it's official. Bonnie Crombie has lost her seat. I find that absolutely staggering. She is the former mayor of Mississauga of a decade. She was running against, I think, a political neophyte in terms of Patrick Brown's mother-in-law.
Your best friend, David.
I know. Well, when it comes to Patrick Brown, it's less politics and more paint in place, if you know what I'm saying. And what I'm getting, one of the bizarre sidebars, I addressed it earlier with Jim Karahalios, Harrison, is that can you possibly explain why the Patrick Brown people seem to be getting welcomed back into this party? It was only 7 years ago when a palace coup ousted Patrick Brown 6 months, which is barely hardly any time before the next provincial election. Everything turned out, of course, rosy for Ford. But I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I think the case with Patrick Brown is that he is the ultimate pragmatist. And he just reads the situation as it is in front of him and does what he needs to do to get the best result for himself. at whatever moment that is, depending really not even depending on the circumstances. Many people who are really have their heart in the game are going to hold on to some grudges, especially if in the case of Patrick Brown, who was set to win, was set to be the premier. David, it could have been Patrick Brown winning his third majority government tonight. If he didn't get cooed out of the job, if he didn't get backstabbed in the middle of the night, basically. But I think what I've heard from some people involved in the PC party and involved in that operation was that Bonnie Crombie and Patrick Brown have their own beef.
Correct.
And so this was a part of Patrick Brown getting one up on Bonnie Crombie. This may be him just, setting himself up for another fight. But really, I can't explain why he would do this. The only explanation I can find is that he had a bigger gripe with Bonnie Crombie than he did with Doug Ford. And so he saw this as an opportunity to backstab Bonnie Crombie, and he successfully did that. I'm amazed at Patrick Brown's political survival and his chameleon-like way of just holding on to power in whatever way possible. It's remarkable that he's the mayor of Brampton. I don't really even know how that came about, to be honest, but he pulled it off and he's still on the job.
You know what, Harrison? I kind of have an idea how he became the mayor of Brampton, and I don't want to say anything that's going to get me into trouble, but if I had Bonnie Crombie's ear right now, I would reach out to Elections Ontario and maybe even the OPP and the RCMP. I would ask for an audit of what happened in the election tonight. I'm just telling you what my sources are telling me. We don't call him Sneaky Patrick Brown for nothing. So if Bonnie Crombie gets wind of this, because after all, I don't know if you saw a report last week, Harrison, we indicated that senior City of Brampton staffers were working on Patrick Brown's mother-in-law's campaign in a different city from Brampton, presumably on the taxpayer dime and time. And this is exactly what happened in 2022 when Patrick Brown ran for federal leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Same deal, using staffers from a different city at his secret Vaughan headquarters, which turned out to be a donation in kind. I don't want to say too much more other than I'm kind of surprised he's not behind bars right now. Harrison, last word goes to you, my friend.
Well, the thing that I'm thinking about now is I'm just shocked at how weak the provincial opposition has been over the past, what it will be likely 8 years. I mean, I just can't believe that the Liberal Ontario leader has lost their seat now in the second election in a row. They barely just made official party status. That number is 12 seats. They're now up to 14 seats, at least as CTV is calling it. It is remarkable that in provincial politics, there is really no opposition right now. Doug Ford, the first Ontario premier to win 3 straight majority governments in 50 years. It's a remarkable political career. It really is. You have to say that. But I think that Ontario voters are poorly served by having such a poor opposition. Whether you're a liberal or a conservative, I think we just want competency in politics. And we're just not getting that right now. It's domination and one party rule, it feels like. But it might not be the worst thing. It would be a lot worse if the NDP won tonight. I think we can all agree on that.
Well, that is indeed what happened in 1990 under very eerily similar circumstances. Harrison, I really appreciate your analysis. And before you go, where can our viewers read your stuff?
You can find me on social media on X. Just search my name, Harrison Faulkner. I'll be there on X.
Okay, and that's Faulkner. Harrison, a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you, David.
You got it. And that was Harrison Faulkner, independent journalist.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.